means that the number one pick in the 2021 NBA draft goes to the Detroit Pistons.
Who's got the number one pick in this year's draft? Who's got the number one pick in this year's draft?
Basketball!
Select Isaiah Stewart.
The Detroit Pistons select Killian Hayes.
Sadiq, that was absolutely sensational.
I don't know what went into that process. I met the criteria to be selected, but I wasn't.
From long range. Oh! Yes!
Detroit basketball! Hey, what's going on, Pistons fans? Welcome back to another edition of the Palace of Pistons Podcast, brought to you by Believe Podcast Network. Aaron Johnson and Jasper Apollonia here with you for this week's show. We're still waiting on Mike to give us some time to come back on the show, but he's been so busy running the Cleveland Cavaliers podcast on Believe. So if you want to get some perspective on the Cavaliers, another team in the division of the Detroit Pistons, definitely make sure to go and check him out. He's been hosting that with Derek Anderson. So we know Mike's killing it. I've listened to a couple episodes so far. It's great stuff, but we miss Mike here. We're hoping to get him back on at least in some sort of rotation or something. Hopefully soon. But for now, you're stuck with just Jasper and I. So Jasper, since you're kind enough to join me, unlike Mike, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Really, let's not sugarcoat it. The fact of the matter is, Mike is an actual adult. Unlike me, despite my advanced age as well, I'm about to be 29 in August. Mike is driving his girlfriend places. He's selling his house. That's stuff that like real adults do. I don't have to do any of that stuff. So I'm always here, and I'm more than happy to be back on this week's edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast, Aaron. I mean, hey, we don't have, former Cleveland Brown legend Derek Anderson as our co-host, but we're not too bad either, are we?
No, we're bad, but we're not like that bad. Like, obviously, Mike, he's obviously the star over there. Like, we get it. We don't have that star power here, but I like to think we try to bring some good perspective on the Detroit Pistons and sometimes the NBA as a whole. And sometimes that comes with getting ripped apart in the YouTube comments section, having our lives threatened and our any sort of integrity that we have shredded to pieces. But then there's also, those really nice stories where someone comments and says, hey, I've been listening to Pistons podcast. You guys have converted me to your podcast because you guys give such a good perspective on the team. So those ones kind of they make up for all the hate that we seem to get in the YouTube comment section. But
hey, you know what, Aaron? I even appreciate the hate, if you can even call it that, because the people that I do see, sometimes leaving those negative comments, they're repeat listeners. So whether you are a first-time listener or you're a repeat listener, whether it's because you hate us or love us, we do appreciate it either way. It really does mean a lot to us to be growing this, following and to be growing this podcast, even while Mike is taking his celebrity tour around the world. So we do really appreciate it for all of our listeners out there.
Well, we got some fun stuff to get into today, Jasper. But first off, we couldn't go any further in this show without talking about our sponsor, BetOnline. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to manage all your favorite sports, contests, and events with first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews and news for every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports information, from live in-game betting, props, and futures. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to join and make your first sports bet. Use our promo code BELIEVE50, that's BLEAV50, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. So Jasper, we've got a couple interesting topics to talk about. We talked about a little bit our comment section in our podcast. Maybe we provide some controversy from time to time that gets the people going. What else has brought plenty of controversy going back to mid-1990s now to today are the Detroit Pistons teal jerseys, the teal era of Detroit basketball with the horse logo. Those are coming back. Those jerseys are coming back. The Detroit Pistons announced earlier this week that the classic edition uniforms for the 2022-2023 NBA season will be the throwback teal Detroit Pistons jerseys. Now, I love these jerseys. I think they look great. I think it's unique. It's so much better than the jerseys of recent years where it's just a bland gray, or even a couple of years, not a couple, but probably 4 or 5 years ago when it was like that cream gray or cream white, and it was absolutely disgusting. These bring a lot more flair to the situation for Detroit. I mean, it goes back to that era of Grant Hill, Jerry Stackhouse, Lindsey Hunter, Ben Wallace, some of those all-time, Pistons that stand out, that have had, great careers with the Pistons, and with Grant Hill, obviously he played great elsewhere. But these jerseys, they have brought a lot of controversy, and a lot of the fans, who are a little bit older, were around back when these were being worn in 1996, 1997. They're not as big of fans of these jerseys as the younger generation seemingly is, because if you go on Twitter, the majority of the people talking about these jerseys absolutely love them. They're ecstatic. There have been campaigns for years to bring the teal back, return of the teal. Everyone's wanted it back. Now they're coming back. You're hearing from the older crowd that these are terrible, that it represents a bad time in Detroit Pistons franchise history. But the young people love them. I love them. How do you feel about it? What do you think about all this controversy surrounding these new jerseys?
Well, first off, Aaron, I want to apologize to Jerry Stackhouse, Terry Mills, Allen Houston, and of course, crucial member of the original Dream Team, Christian Laettner, for being so heinously omitted from your list of Pistons legends that did wear the teal at one point or another.
Stackhouse.
Huh?
I did say Jerry Stackhouse.
Oh, did you? Oh, I'm sorry. Well, then Joe Dumars deserves an apology from me then on behalf of you. No, Aaron, for me, it's interesting because, you're a little bit younger than I am, and I actually didn't really start watching basketball until the early 2000s. So I don't really have many memories of the teal jerseys. If anything, actually, when I first started watching basketball, I had a bunch of cards from the 90s, and I was very confused why the Pistons didn't wear teal, because all the cards I had, they were wearing the teal with the horse logo. So I was never actually a big fan of the color scheme. I always loved that horse logo. And even if they didn't bring back the teal, I would have been okay with them bringing back that horse. As a kid, I just thought it was cool. And it was a very unique, very different kind of logo. And I think that stands out even more, especially in today, when so many NBA teams, so many franchises among sports, so many just corporate things in general have become so simplified in their logos. Everything is so simple and straightforward. The Pistons logo from the 90s is not that. It's very busy. And I kind of like that. It's just an alternative kind of look. I will say this, though. Despite my lack of strong feelings on this, I think it's important to note that there are former players that do have really strong feelings on that. And being a little bit younger, it's easy to lose that perspective of why those teal jerseys were so hated, why they were so controversial at the time. Luckily enough, Isaiah Thomas, on an episode of Full Court back in the day, kind of explained why he was so upset with it. And you could see him get visibly angry talking about this. The Pistons were, frankly, a middling franchise for the majority of their existence. They were okay in the 70s, but up until the 80s, they did not really experience a whole bunch of success. When Isaiah Thomas came into the organization, when he, as a player, changed the entire mentality, when he adjusted his own playing style in order to win, when they built that team really from the ground up, first being a credible offensive juggernaut, then being the bad boy Pistons. Defense, I mean, when you think defense, you think the bad boy Pistons, period. They had reached the mountaintop. They won back-to-back titles. Should have been back-to-back-to-back titles. right after Isaiah retires because of his injuries, the Pistons front office, their ownership, goes, hey, we've just gotten to the pinnacle of the NBA franchises. We're one of the elites now. But we don't like being the bad boys anymore. We don't like having this negative reputation around our franchise. We want to move away from that. And by completely revamping their look, by completely revamping their image, what the Pistons essentially did was spit on that legacy that had just been created by Isaiah Thomas, by Joe Dumars, by Dennis Rodman, by John Sally, by Rick Mahorn, by Bill Laimbeer. They basically said, hey, we know that you made our mediocre franchise into one of the best in the league, but we don't want to be the bad boys anymore. We don't want to have that image of being dirty and mean. And I think really what they did was insult those guys. They insulted their legacies, and they really insulted themselves by trying to do something else. How can you say, after you finally put together the base of a winning franchise, that you then want to move away from that? Why would you want to move away from the legacy of winning? Why would you want to move away from the legacy of being tough? Why would you want to move away from essentially what the city of Detroit is all about? Grit, grind, people coming together to create something greater than the sum of their individuals. And when I think about the teal jerseys, yes, they look cool. Yes, they are fun for the younger fans. But at the same time, I don't think that you can have a proper discussion, a proper evaluation of them without taking into account what they meant at the time. And if it's just about aesthetics, that's fine. But at the same time, I think we need to have that perspective on what those former players felt and why they were so against the teal jerseys. Not just be like, oh, you're old, that's why you don't like them. Oh, you're boring, that's why you don't like them. No, people don't like them because they were a repudiation of everything that had come before them in the previous decade. So that's how I feel about it. Do I necessarily care that they're back in the teal? Not so much. But I do think at the same time, we have to respect and understand why the teal is so controversial, Aaron.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, like I am definitely on the younger side, so I wasn't around, during the time that they were wearing these jerseys. I actually didn't know the full story that you kind of just gave, all the backstory to it. I mean, I knew a little bit, but I've never really cared enough about jerseys or these jerseys in general to really go into the details and into the weeds of why they are so controversial. I guess at the end of the day, for me, it's like they're just a jersey. We're going to wear them 10 games next year. It's not like they're wearing these every game. It's not like these are, they're home and aways. These are classics. They're wearing them for 10 games. I think they're going to do numbers in terms of selling, the Cade, the Ivy jerseys, the Sadiq Bey, like those are going to go off the shelves fast. They're going to sell well. I think that was a big reason why, they eventually decided to bring them back because this is something that people have been asking about for years. And I think it's not a coincidence that Detroit's finally starting to become an interesting team and have some promise. And now is when they decide to bring these back because there's a little bit more buzz around the Pistons, even if they're not necessarily going to be good yet. They at least have some interesting young players that people care about. So I don't think it's a coincidence that they're finally back now. And yeah, I mean, I like them. I also like kind of how you mentioned teams nowadays are getting so simplistic, so bland with their jerseys. The Jazz, for example, they released new jerseys that just look so dull and so boring. This is something different. It obviously excites some people. It obviously annoys and bothers others. So it's a little divisive, I guess. I didn't quite understand that a topic of a jersey that players are going to wear, could be this divisive again. I guess I'll use that word once again. But at the end of the day, to me, it's just a jersey. They're wearing them for 10 games. I like the design. I like the color. I guess the backstory behind them isn't necessarily the greatest. But for the Pistons, they have been being asked to do this by their fans. From their perspective, they're listening to the people that are engaging with them, on social media, the people that they're trying to reach nowadays, the younger generation, the younger fans who are either just getting into their basketball fandom, who are going to, potentially be financial contributors to the franchise for the next 30, 40, 50 years. So it makes sense that they're trying, to reach that group. And I think it's at least they're doing something that, is going to draw some eyes rather than something like what the Jazz are doing or like those Motor City jerseys that they had a couple years ago, essentially just a copy of Denver's Mile High jerseys. They're doing something different. I like it from that point of view. I guess I can understand the disdain for them from the other side. I just don't have those same feelings because I wasn't around. I wasn't alive for the Bad Boys. I wasn't alive, for the majority of the time that these teal jerseys were worn. So from that point of view, I just can't have those same types of feelings. But at the end of the day, again, the Pistons are wearing these for 10 games. You're only going to see them 10 times. I guess if you really hate them that much, you don't watch the Pistons for 10 games.
I know Isaiah won't.
But they're, like I said, I guess the last thing I'll say is these jerseys are going to do numbers. The Cade Cunningham jerseys will sell out day one. They'll be insanely hard to get, at least right off the bat. I would imagine it's going to be the same for Jaden Ivey. So for the Pistons, it's a smart organizational move. I don't think they're going to get enough backlash to matter when the financial implications are going to be really, really strong for them.
No, absolutely not. And you know what? I just laid out that old school perspective. Why don't I lay out like the new school viewpoint? Because I think if you're looking at from that perspective of somebody that is younger, that is in their, early mid 20s, maybe even younger than that. Look, the Pistons came out of the Teal era and won a title within 4 years. And after that, of course, they went to those 6 straight Eastern Conference finals and 2 finals overall, won a title. But the last 15 years have been abysmal, far worse than the Teal era ever was. I mean, look, people talk about how much of a disappointment it was, but that team won. They had a team that won 54 games. They made the playoffs. They didn't win in the playoffs, but they made the playoffs. And that's more than you can say for any Pistons team. What's the last Pistons team that got close to 54 wins? The 2016 team, and they won 43. So I look at it from that perspective, and it's like, yeah, in the immediate aftermath of the Bad Boys, I could see how switching to the Teal was offensive to Isaiah Thomas and why he still reacts with real anger to it. But if you're looking at it from the perspective of the last 20 years, I mean, what's the big deal? There's nothing to... If you're moving on from the last 15 years, good. That means you're trying to finally win. Doing something a little bit different, there's nothing wrong with that. And, you did come out of that Teal area and you won a title. So I think a lot of those criticisms, a lot of those things, they're just not so true anymore. The Bad Boys were 30 years ago. So more than 30 years ago. So I look at it from that younger fan perspective. And I totally agree with you, Aaron. At least it's exciting. At least it's fun. It's something that's going to bring them some money. I don't have a problem with it personally.
So there's, what was that, 20 minutes on NBA jerseys? I never thought that I'd have to do 25 minutes on a topic of the shirts and the shorts that NBA players are going to wear for a couple games out of an 82-game season. But
people feel strongly about it, Aaron. I don't know what to tell you.
People really, really, really do. And I guess, not being around for that era, I wasn't really enlightened to that whole situation. But there's 25 minutes on it. Let's move on to our second topic, the topic that I'm really excited to talk about. And we're talking
basketball? Actual basketball?
We're talking about the Detroit Pistons next season, 2022-2023 campaign. Not the jerseys, but the players and the performance on the court. You know, the Pistons are around the league considered to be one of the best, teams in terms of young players in this league. Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Sadiq Bey, Isaiah Stewart. They are widely respected for the young core that the general manager, Troy Weaver, is building here in Detroit. With that being said, there's an expectation that some of these players are going to start taking that next step in terms of their development. Now, some steps will be bigger than others. Some players will break out. Others might stagnate. Others might even regress. Let's talk about those players that are going to break out. Each of us came into today's podcast with a player that we think is due to break out next season. So, Jasper, let's not wait any further. Who do you think will be the breakout Piston for the 2022-2023 season?
Well, Aaron, the way we kind of did this was I picked a role player and you picked a star. And the reason I picked a role player, it's a guy that I have been talking about all offseason. It's because the way that you become a championship contender is not just through one or two big stars. It's about having that complete team. And a player that I think can certainly fill a huge role for this roster is Isaiah Livers. Last season, Livers was solid, not spectacular. He only played 19 games. He averaged 6.5 points, 3 rebounds, very good shooting splits, 46% overall, 42% from 3, and 86% from the line. Per 36, now these are not perfect numbers, but 11.5 points, 5.5 rebounds, almost 2 steals and blocks combined. What I'm a little bit more interested, though, is where I think he can fit into the starting lineup this year. So if you look at his time as a starter, only 5 starts, very small sample size, but we do have one. He averaged about 10 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 2 threes per game in 29 minutes. I think that is very, very reasonable to expect if he does become a starter this year. Now, in those starts, he shot ridiculously. He literally shot 51, 50, 89. I don't expect that to continue, but I certainly think that type of production, especially from the 4th, 5th option in a Pistons starting lineup, is very, very reasonable. Now, we've gotten a little bit of him in Summer League as well. He only played the 2 games, but he played extremely well. We've already broken down his defense, his ability to switch, his ability to get into the post and be physical, but also get out onto the perimeter. He averaged 14 points, 4.5 rebounds, and once again, he just looks so at ease. 44% overall, 39% from 3. So this is the profile of a player that absolutely has that level of efficiency in his game. Now, here's my reasons why he can explode. First off, every single stat has to be taken with a grain of salt because Livers, frankly, only played 383 total minutes last season. However, in those minutes, his on-off splits, Aaron, were plus 7.6. That is the best of any Piston who played over 200 minutes last year. Not only that, it wasn't just because they were so bad when he was off the floor. They were only minus 0.8 points per 100 with him on the court. They were almost dead even. That, to me, is really encouraging. And again, that was the best mark of any Piston with over 200 minutes. Now, when we're talking about him being a part of the starting lineup, him being a player that's going to take a leap this year, I think it has to come into a discussion about his role with this team. What do the Pistons need? Well, they need somebody who can catch and shoot on the perimeter, especially from the corners, especially now that they've gotten rid of Frank Jackson. What did Isaiah Livers do last year? He shot 43% on his catch and shoot threes from the corner, 64% efficient field goal percentage on those catch and shoots. He's extremely, extremely good from there. Not only that, in limited paint touches, he shot 71%. So basically, if they can put him on like the light version of the Sadiq Bey growth plan, He should up those paint touches, up his drives, especially since he shot almost 70% on drives to the rim last year. If you can up those paint touches a little bit, give him a couple more shots from outside, you're talking about a player that can be extremely effective, both inside and outside. That's essentially what you need from a modern 3-and-D player. If Isaiah Livers can be that, there's no reason why he can't be a huge part of this Pistons lineup. It's not just that. Like, his shot chart looks fantastic. There's an even spread around the perimeter, and he shoots well from every spot there. Basically, everything else comes inside the paint. So this is a guy you don't need to teach his role. He already is in his role. He already knows how to play it, and he's already been successful in limited minutes. Now, talking about those limited minutes, I think that there is maybe a desire for people to look at that limited sample size and say, well, we can't really trust it. I think in this case, you have to go back to his college production. In college, Isaiah Livers shot 41% from three, shot 43% from three his senior year, made over 2 threes per game his junior and senior years on 218 total attempts. He was a 90% free throw shooter. So those are all things that point to a guy having a sample size that is good enough to say, this guy can shoot. Now, Aaron, I'm going to finish up with a couple of reasons why I think you can doubt him. Like I already said, he's only played 383 total minutes, and all of those minutes came at the end of the season when Detroit was already dead in the water. So it's harder to point to there being all these really competitive games. I know the Pistons were better towards the end of the season, but everybody looked at that schedule and said, all right, that's our night off. Pistons, we can take it easy. Another reason I think that maybe there's a reason for hesitation in him in the starting lineup is in the 151 minutes he played with Cade Cunningham, the Pistons had a net rating of negative 10.3. Even worse, their defensive rating was 123 points per 100 possessions. His defensive rating of 114.6 was the worst of any Piston with more than 100 minutes of playing time. That's worse than Marvin Bagley, who we have ripped apart for his defensive deficiencies on this podcast. So if Isaiah Livers is supposed to be your 3-and-D guy, there's not a whole lot of evidence to show that the things that jump out on tape that we've already touched on in this podcast that you've seen in Summer League are necessarily impacting the overall defense. Still, and this is how I'll end it, what Isaiah Livers can bring to your offense is worth it, even if he's not necessarily affecting the Pistons defense overall. Even if that's not the case, it's not just noise. He's not Marvin Bagley. He's not going to actively hurt you on that end. He is a proven shooter. And if he can show that his defense has taken a little bit of a leap, that it's part of a whole, there is no reason to believe Isaiah Livers cannot approach close to 30 minutes this year and give you at least 10 points per game on outstanding shooting. Worst case scenario, he's a great trade chip. Best case scenario, you just found the guy that every single team in this league that is a contender trades for every single year. That's my argument on that one, Aaron. I know I talked a lot about him. I put a lot of information into there, but Isaiah Livers is a guy I feel really strongly about this upcoming season. I think he can be a really big part of this Pistons core.
I'm going to give you credit where credit's due. That was a hell of an argument. That was a whole lot of information, a whole lot of statistics, but I really like it. I do think that Isaiah Livers has that potential to be that high-level role player, that connector to a team that, isn't the star necessarily on either side of the floor, but is such a reliable piece on both sides, whether it's his shooting on offense or his ability to play help side and communicate defensively. I think there's a lot to be said about Isaiah Livers and what he can be for the Detroit Pistons. I love that you included that stat about, his success playing alongside Cade Cunningham. Obviously, that's incredibly important moving forward for the Pistons. And I also think you have to give credit to what he did at the collegiate level at Michigan, playing for a top program, producing the way he did. You have to give some level of credence to those numbers because he didn't get a whole ton of time in the NBA last season because he spent the first half of the year recovering from a foot injury. And when he was healthy, he was easily, right away when he stepped into the picture for Detroit, was one of their better role players as a rookie coming in halfway through the season with a handful of G League games under his belt. And he immediately stepped in and was making an impact over some other guys that had been on the roster all season and had been in the NBA for a handful of years. So I really like that Isaiah Livers pick, taking it to another level, taking it to the top of the roster. I think Cade Cunningham is a guy that you have to look at as a potential, not breakout player for the Pistons, but breakout player in the NBA, breakout star in the NBA. This is a guy that last year was arguably the rookie of the year. Obviously, it did not go his way. But when you look at the season that he had in what I feel is an incredibly talented rookie class, definitely better than the year before it. And I think it's better than this rookie class coming in as well, alongside Evan Mobley and Scotty Barnes, just at the top. And you can throw Jalen Green really in there as well.
And Franz Wagner.
Oh,
don't make the Michigan fans come after us.
We could go down the list of players because there are so many guys that I like in the 2022 draft class, or 2021, pardon me. But Cade Cunningham was phenomenal. And you look at the growth that he took from the first half of the season to the second half of the season, jumped from under 16 points a game to over 21 points a game post All-Star break. I think the biggest thing that you look at for him is the shooting and the turnovers. Those were his biggest problems consistently throughout the year. Post All-Star break, he dropped all the way to 27.5% from the three-point line. Shot just 31% on the year overall from beyond the arc, but I'm not concerned about that. I think Cade's numbers are bound to rise, and it could be by 3, 4, 5 percentage points even. This is a guy that took 6 threes per game at Oklahoma State, was a 40% three-point shooter there, so he was making over 2 threes per game at the collegiate level. This is also a guy that in the NBA was doubled 12.8 possessions per game, 27.5% of the possessions that Cade Cunningham played, he was double teamed. That is top 20 in the league. The handful of players that were doubled more than him, let's go down that list and read off some of these players. Giannis, Ja Morant, Joel Embiid, Luka Doncic, Kevin Durant, James Harden, Jason Tatum, the stars of the league, the top 10, top 15 players, top 5 players. If you're looking at guys like Luka, Tatum, Giannis, you're talking about the best of the best players in the NBA. Those were the only players in the league getting double teamed more than Cade Cunningham. And that's where a lot of Cunningham's inefficiency came from. This is a guy that only averaged 1 point per possession on double teams. This is a guy that obviously, when you mix in having to take some bad shots out of the double team and his turnover issues that are very, very understandable as a rookie guard, coming into the league, playing on one of the worst teams in the league, playing on a team without a true number 2 ball handler, playing on a team without a lot of shooting. It was very, very easy for teams to just say, forget Corey Joseph, forget Frank Jackson and whoever else. Like, I'm not worried about Killian Hayes. Let's just focus on keeping Cade Cunningham under control. And to be fair, when teams did that, it was able to work a fair amount because those other guys on the roster, mixed with Cade being a 20-year-old rookie playing in his first season, there were bound to be mistakes. This is a guy that is primed to go into year 2 and take a major, major leap. He's ranked 4th on DraftKings for most improved player of the year, best odds, behind the likes of Tyrese Halliburton and Jalen Brunson, Anthony Edwards. He's right there with those guys. And I think you look at what Cade Cunningham, has shown. He hasn't shown a ton of what he's doing this offseason, but from what we've seen from other people, from other images, like he is training with guys like Kevin Durant, Domantas Sabonis, a whole slew, Kyrie Irving, Chris Paul, like a whole slew of great, great players in this league. The Pistons have another guard to go alongside him now in Jaden Ivey. Having a veteran guard like Alec Burks who can handle and can shoot and can score is going to do wonders for Cunningham. The roster overall, Isaiah Livers being available for a full season is going to help. Like, the team got better around Cunningham. There's a little bit more shooting. There's definitely some more ball handling. It bodes well for Cade Cunningham to really, really take a leap, because I think it'll be a lot harder for teams to throw as many double teams at Cunningham as they were last year. And hell, even if they are throwing double teams, obviously Cunningham is going to be much more prepared to handle them, especially when you go from, the first half of his rookie season to the second half. Even there was a jump in his ability to handle, those double teams, those triple teams that he saw at times. So I am all in on Cade Cunningham taking a big leap this year. I think he's a guy that could make the All-Star game. I think some of that is unfortunately going to depend on how good of a team Detroit is. It's not going to be the biggest factor, but I do think there's something to be said about that in terms of getting votes from coaches, getting votes from players, maybe not necessarily from fans. I still think this is a guy that is bound to take a major step forward, be an all-star level player, even if he doesn't necessarily make the team, be one of those guys considered for most improved player of the year. The numbers are bound to improve. This is a guy that averaged 21, 6 and 6.5 assists per game in the second half of the year. So I think if he goes and averages 21, 6 and 6, or excuse me, 22, 6 and 6 for a full season, like, obviously that's an all-star player. And obviously he's going to have made some serious improvements. If he becomes a more consistent three-point shooter that we did see at the collegiate level, if he's able to turn down the turnovers just a little bit, that will really help his game, in the box score overall. It's going to be easier for Cunningham to perform at a higher level this year with higher level players around him, with more ball handling, a little bit more shooting around him, even though I don't think the Pistons have a great shooting team just yet. But this is a guy that was, had a 27% usage in his rookie year. Like, that's essentially unprecedented for rookies, for young players to carry the burden that Cunningham did in his first season in the NBA. I think an off season of development is bound to do wonders for him, and you're going to see him take that big jump to help bring the Pistons forward in their development as a franchise.
Yeah, Aaron, I'm really glad you brought up Cade, because, the player I chose in Isaiah Livers is, let's be real, he's a role player right now, but I'm picking him to become more than just a role player. I'm picking him to become a real part of the core of this franchise. But that is going to all depend on the development of Cade Cunningham. And Cade taking that next step is what's going to allow other players like Isaiah Livers, like Isaiah Stewart, like Jaden Ivey, like Saddiq Bey, to take that next step in their development as players. Because the fact of the matter is, role players are largely created by the stars around them and the situations that they're put in by those stars. So I totally agree with you. I absolutely think Cade can take that next leap into that all-star level player this year, improve his efficiency, cut down on those turnovers, up his scoring, up his output across the board. And by doing so, a rising tide lifts all boats. And if Cade can do that, I certainly think that the path to becoming real, impactful, winning NBA players for the rest of the roster, I think that's all going to depend on Cade. So I'm really glad you brought him up as well. I totally agree with you. Those double teams, the more comfortable he gets navigating them, the more open shots it opens up for those guys like Alec Burks and Isaiah Livers and Saddiq Bey. So, yeah, I love it, Aaron. I think that the Pistons, outside of just those two guys, have a lot of players on this roster that could certainly have a shot at breaking out this year. Saddiq Bey being one of them, Isaiah Stewart being another one of them. They're going to have a chance to do that. I would love if anybody in our YouTube comments has somebody that they think we missed, maybe another role player, please don't hesitate to comment. We love that. So we want to know what you think as well.
Yeah, most definitely. I think if you're looking at another guy, I think Saddiq Bey is going to be the popular name of guys that could break out. I think a lot of people are excited for his third year in the league. The stories that have come out about him this summer have certainly riled up and excited some of the fan base, and rightfully so. You know, those are fun stories. The piece from James Edwards in The Athletic talking about how he went out to Colorado and did some insane training there. I even saw he was with Detroit Piston franchise legend Arnie Kander. Arnie posted that I think a week or two ago, so I'm not sure how recent the picture is. I know Saddiq was out at Summer League in Las Vegas. Not sure if that was from before or if he's back in Colorado, but I think that's another guy that's going to be a popular pick and rightfully so. Going into his third year, I think there's definitely some things that he can do to help take his game to the next level. But like Jasper said, yeah, definitely let us know if you're watching this on YouTube. Let us know in the comments who you think's due to break out for the Pistons in this upcoming year. Do you agree with me? Do you agree with Jasper? Do you have a different name? Definitely let us know. I did want to point out that if we were talking about the entire NBA overall, as Mike Anguilano said in our podcast group chat, even though he couldn't be on the show with us this week, he was still talking with us. He said I would pick Stanley Johnson. He's 100% right. Year 7, year 8, Stanley Johnson is due for a breakout. It's also insane that I think he's been in the league now for 5-6 years. That's just it's insane to me because
Aaron, 7 years now, man.
7 years.
Drafted in 2015. My goodness.
Crazy. Because that's when I think the year before is when I really started to get in to immersing myself in basketball and the Pistons. So it's absolutely crazy that he's going into his 7th year. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. But yes, if we were picking just in terms of the entire NBA, absolutely Stanley Johnson would be my pick. I had to give you a little shout out there when you couldn't be with us.
Aaron, before we wrap this up, have I ever mentioned that one of my ex-girlfriends is dating a former teammate of Stanley Johnson, Caleb Tarjewski?
You mentioned this. I don't know if you've done it on a podcast.
Yeah.
Those thoughts before, like probably a while ago, but I do remember you telling me that.
Yeah, I have some good dirt on Milan's Eurobasket team. So if anybody wants some inside scoops on what's going on behind the scenes there, just hit me up on Twitter if you're a big Eurobasket fan. I don't know if BetOnline has those odds or not. We'll have to check in.
I guess we'll have to now. Jasper's got all the scoop. He's got the inside info on EuroLeague happening. So yeah, anything else besides EuroLeague basketball that you want to hit on before we wrap this one up?
Oh my God, I don't know. I was also once in a fantasy baseball league with Dennis Rodman. That's all I got.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't think I've mentioned that on the pod either. Mike's gonna be mad that he's missing some stories, but I'll just finish with this. The year before in that same fantasy baseball league, Jose Canseco was the guest owner the year before Dennis Rodman. And weirdly enough, both he and Dennis both dated Madonna and Carmen Electra in the 90s. So I asked Dennis Rodman, I was like, hey Dennis, how was dating Carmen Electra? And he goes, freak. That was it. That was the whole interaction.
You're getting some gems, some deep cuts right now from Jasper.
Yeah, if you stick around on the end of these podcasts, I'll drop some gems. So yeah,
can't give the list. They've been blessed with too much here in these last couple minutes.
Yeah, you heard it straight from the worm's mouth, folks. Carmen Electra, freak.
All right. I think this is where we gotta wrap before we go any deeper into the rabbit hole. Guys, thanks so much for listening to this week's show. Make sure to follow us on Twitter. You can follow Palace of Pistons at Palace of Pistons, myself at A Johnson NBA, and Jasper at Blade Cunningham. Guys, thanks so much again for listening. Thanks to Believe and our sponsor, Bet Online. We're going to see you next time here on the Palace of Pistons podcast.